Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're continuing our all 32 NFL team previews for the upcoming 2023 fantasy football season. And today we are beginning the AFC East with the defending AFC East champs, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills have one of the best quarterbacks in the league and one of the best offenses in the league. And they're quite an interesting standpoint from fantasy because some of their personnel is changing a little bit. We're going to talk about how those personnel changes can affect this Bills offense and how you can take advantage in all fantasy formats in Dynasty, redraft, and best ball leagues. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the like button. I really do appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. If you're listening to the podcast on audio form, please rate and review. It really does help me out. And I'm going to talk a little bit about best ball drafts here on this episode. If you want to get started with best ball drafts, I recommend doing so on Underdog. Use my promo code MConley88 to get your first deposit matched up to $100. All right, that does it for the introduction. Let's go ahead and talk about the Buffalo Bills. All right, so before we talk about what the Bills are going to be up to in 2023, let's break down what they did in 2022. So last year, the Bills offense finished second in the league in both points per game and yards per game. In the 2022 season as a whole, they trailed only Kansas City in both categories. Now, like we mentioned on the Cincinnati Bengals episode with the canceled game in Week 17, you do have to look at per game averages to kind of get the best picture of how the Bills offense looked. Now, they also, in terms of their play calling, ranked 17th in rush rate. They were right in the middle of the league in terms of pass versus run. You can inverse the rush rate. It means they were 16th in pass rate. And it was the first year with Ken Dorsey as their offensive coordinator. He was previously the quarterback's coach when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator. Daboll is now the head coach of the New York Giants. So last year was the first year with Ken Dorsey calling the plays full time. And so I kind of think if you're looking for the play calling and kind of the personnel groupings and all that, I think you really can only look at 2022 for all that information. But the personnel is going to be changing just a little bit. They lost Devin Singletary in free agency. They drafted tight end Dalton Kincaid. So maybe it might look a little bit different this year. But I do think that last year's success and play calling is going to be fairly sustainable for the Buffalo Bills long term. And the reason that it's going to be sustainable is because of their elite quarterback, which is Josh Allen. So Josh Allen finished last season as quarterback 2 overall and quarterback 3 in fantasy points per game, which was par for the course. He's been a top 3 fantasy quarterback in each of the last 3 seasons. He was a top 5 weekly quarterback in 11 of his 16 starts and only had 2 weeks outside of the top 10 quarterbacks. Simply put, he's just an elite option. He's going to be elite week in, week out. He has one of the highest floors of all quarterbacks. He has one of the highest ceilings of all quarterbacks, large part due to his rushing ability. Allen ranked 6th among quarterbacks in carries per game, 2nd overall in yards, and 3rd overall in touchdowns. His rushing volume did decline, however, about halfway through the season as he had a little bit of a wrist injury that happened in the game against the Vikings. I do think there's not any lingering effect for that. I do expect to kind of see the full Josh Allen rushing workload back again for the 2023 season. So the bottom line for the Bills quarterback position is Josh Allen is just an elite option at the quarterback position. Like, he has a legitimate path to finishing as QB1 overall. He's done it before. He was drafted as the QB1 overall last year. He is in the top tier of quarterbacks. Like, he's just one of the best. And that top tier of quarterbacks, I believe, are, in any order you want to put them, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. I just so happen to have Josh Allen as my quarterback 1 for 2023. I think when you look at what he does in terms of a week-to-week basis, he has the highest weekly floor of any of them. And he kind of combines the rushing upside of Hurts with the passing upside of Mahomes. And I just think that he's just an elite option. Like, in redraft leagues, he is my quarterback 1. Best ball is a little bit different because in best ball, you're always looking for stacking partners. I don't necessarily think that Josh Allen's in like the easiest position to stack in best ball because right now Stefon Diggs is kind of a tail end of the first round pick, and it's really too early in the second round to take a quarterback like Josh Allen. So you're kind of left, kind of waiting to try to get him to fall all the way to the 3rd if you want to stack him with Stefon Diggs, which is kind of difficult unless you want to kind of reach for him in the 2nd. So what I've been doing in a lot of my best ball drafts that have Josh Allen is, taking him in the mid to late 3rd round and trying to pair him up with one of his secondary or tertiary targets, like a Dalton Kincaid, like running back James Cook. You don't have to stack him with Stefon Diggs, but if you do want to stack him with Stefon Diggs, you're probably going to have to reach for him a little bit in the 2nd round. All right, that does it for the quarterback position. Let's go ahead and switch it up and talk running backs. So Devin Singletary, and James Cook were pretty much the entire backfield for the Bills last year. You saw a little bit of Zach Moss, a little bit of Naheem Hines, but not really a whole lot to make a difference. Devin Singletary and James Cook both were active for all 17 games last season, and both of them combined for roughly a 90% snap share and 90% opportunity share, meaning that the other Bills backs got the other 10% snaps and opportunities. Now, the Bills backfield, in total, Singletary, Cook, the whole lot, they totaled 8 weekly top 20 finishes. So about half the time last year, the Bills had a running back finish in the top 20. There were 3 weeks where both Singletary and Cook finished in the weekly top 30 together. So this offense is good enough, productive enough, utilizes the running back position enough that there can be mutual success for two running backs. And a large reason for that is the Bills' usage of the running back in the pass game. The Bills targeted the running back position last year a total of 112 times, which is 13th in the league. Now, let's go ahead and talk about Devin Singletary real quick. So Devin Singletary finished as running back 23 overall and running back 30 in fantasy points per game. He had a 65% snap share last season and a 58% opportunity share. But what's really notable is that inside the 5-yard line, those numbers increased to 87% and 83% respectively. So when the Bills got in goal-to-go scenarios, Devin Singletary was the guy. And he was the guy getting the goal line work. He was the guy getting the red zone work. He was the guy who got the easy touchdowns that this offense generates. In total last season, he got 178 carries and 53 targets. If you're watching on YouTube, please ignore my typo. That was supposed to be carries. The S and the D are right next to each other on the keyboard. Anyway, Devin Singletary got a lot of work last season. He touched the ball over 230 times. Devin Singletary is no longer a Buffalo Bill. So where does that leave us? Well, let's talk about James Cook. James Cook, in his rookie season out of Georgia, finished as running back 44 overall and running back 53 in fantasy points per game. He only had a 24.4% snap share, only a 31.2% opportunity share, and ranked 42nd in the entire league in weighted opportunities. He totaled 91 carries and 33 targets, which is slightly over half of what Devin Singletary got. Now, like I said, Devin Singletary is no longer a Buffalo Bill. Damien Harris is now a Buffalo Bill. So let's take a look at what Damien Harris has been up to in New England. So Damien Harris ranked as running back 41 in fantasy points per game last season on only a 41% opportunity share in a not-so-successful offense. Back in 2021, Damien Harris ranked as running back 18 in fantasy points per game on only a 49% opportunity share, but he had an incredibly high touchdown total with 15. He was a very easy touchdown regression candidate heading into 2022. So what does all this mean? Well, it means this. You got two running backs, Cook and Harris. Naheem Hines is likely out for the entire season. So as of right now, it is just Cook and Harris. Could they potentially sign Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt or trade for Jonathan Taylor now? Yes, that's a possibility. But right now, as it stands, we're looking at Cook and Harris. So if Harris were to slide right into the Devin Singletary role and get all that usage, all those red zone looks, all those inside the 5 goal line carries, he's likely to finish as a top 20 back, which he's done already in his career. However, another possible solution is that James Cook could double his workload. He only had 31% of the opportunities last year. If that number just goes up to 60, which is not unreasonable, he could easily finish as a top 20 back. James Cook is a good pass-catching running back. He was good at it in college. He was good at it last year. And if he gets more work in the passing game, that's going to lead to a lot more fantasy points. So the bottom line is this. Even if these two guys exist as a committee and the roles were very similar to what they were last year, one of them is being underdrafted, is the bottom line. Either Cook is a value at running back 33 where he's being drafted, or Harris is a value at running back 37 or running back 42 where he's being drafted right now. So I happen to think that one or both of these guys is going to be a value pick as long as the Buffalo Bills do not add another running back. Either Cook is going to increase his workload and be a great value, or Harris is going to steal all the Singletary work and be a great value. This offense is good enough and successful enough and utilizes the running back position enough that one of these guys is going to outperform their ADP, bottom line. And so for that reason, I have both of them ranked ahead of where their current ADP is. James Cook is my running back 30. Harris is my running back 37. And like I said earlier, I really like stacking Josh Allen and James Cook together, knowing that James Cook is the pass catching running back. I think that gives you a nice little stack in best ball if you were able to pair them up together. All right, that does it for the running back position. But while I got you here on YouTube, I want to talk about subscribing. So please hit the subscribe button. Stats literally show me that about 90% of the people watching this are not subscribed to the channel. Subscriptions really do help me out a lot. I used to think that content creators were just kind of like begging for likes and subscriptions. But now that I am making content, I realize it actually really helps out a lot and really goes a long way in supporting the channel and helping me out. So take this second. Subscribe to the channel. You'll be notified when new episodes drop. So you'll be the first to get notified when all of the rest of our 32 NFL team previews drop, all of our golf content, all of our college football content, as well as all the other season-long fantasy football content coming your way on Mike's Money Picks. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about some wide receivers. So last year, the Buffalo Bills targeted the wide receiver position at the third highest rate in the NFL. That's quite impressive. The Bills totaled 11 weekly top 10 finishes at the wide receiver position last season. And more importantly, there were 5 weeks with 2 Bills wide receivers in the top 20 and 1 week with 3 Bills receivers in the top 20. Isaiah McKenzie was the primary slot receiver for the Buffalo Bills for the first part of last season, and he had 2 weekly top 20 finishes. He's no longer a Buffalo Bill. Khalil Shakir finished as wide receiver 16 in the only game that McKenzie missed last season. And so you got to kind of figure if Shakir can slide into that role, he might have a little bit of upside. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the 2 Bills' primary receivers. So Stefon Diggs finished as wide receiver 4 overall and wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game last season. And that was his 3rd consecutive top 9 finish in Buffalo since he got traded there before the 2020 season. Diggs ranked 5th in the league in total targets and 10th in target share. And I also think it's worth noting with Diggs that his production was better in the first half of the season. For whatever reason, when Josh Allen got the wrist injury against Minnesota, that kind of just dipped Diggs' production a little bit. I don't necessarily know like that's 100% the reason. There could also be, well, it got colder outside, the Bills play outdoors. Like, I don't know what the exact answer is, but the bottom line is Diggs was more productive in the first half of the season. I don't think it's like enough of a substantial drop to be like, oh, don't draft Stefon Diggs, or oh, I'm worried about Stefon Diggs, or oh, it's going to happen again this year. Like, I don't think it's anything like that. But it is worth noting that Diggs was more productive in the first half of last season. If it was because of Josh Allen's wrist injury, well, that's good. Like, it's done. Like, Josh Allen's better. So nothing to worry about there. Gabriel Davis finishes wide receiver 36 overall and wide receiver 36 in fantasy points per game last season, while ranking only 42nd in total targets and 43rd in target share. Translation: if you're outperforming your rank in targets and target share, it means that your targets are premium targets, and you're likely finding the end zone quite a bit as well. Now, Davis has an incredibly wide range of outcomes on a weekly basis. He had 1 week last year against Pittsburgh where he ranked as wide receiver number 1 in fantasy, and another week where he ranked as wide receiver 9 in fantasy. But he only had 2 more weeks in the top 20. So 4 out of 16, that's 25%. That's not great. A quarter of the time, he was a top 20 wide receiver. 10 of those 16 weeks, he was outside the top 30 wide receivers. Incredibly wide range of weekly outcomes for Gabriel Davis, which is why I find Gabriel Davis to be a much more intriguing option in best ball formats and in daily fantasy formats than in season-long fantasy formats. So the bottom line for the Bills receivers is that Stefon Diggs is a bona fide wide receiver 1 in all fantasy formats. He's a great pick. He's going to have a huge workload. He's a great NFL receiver. He gets open. He catches the ball. He scores touchdowns. Like, there's no really nits to pick in his resume. Gabriel Davis, like I just mentioned, has an incredibly wide range of outcomes on a weekly basis and a season-long basis. I prefer that in a best ball league, where if he gives me a dud, he's not affecting my total score. In a season-long league, you're going to win weeks because of Gabriel Davis, and you're going to lose weeks because of Gabriel Davis. For that reason, he's not a guy I typically target, or the type of player I typically target in season-long fantasy leagues. I like consistent totals that I can count on my team getting each week to, gradually win games no matter who my opponent is. Davis is, he could be the guy that scores 40 for you on a week where you've already lost, or a week where you've already won by 40. I don't like the wide ranges of outcomes in season-long fantasy football. I embrace it in best ball. So I really do like Gabriel Davis in best ball. I've drafted him a lot in best ball. Khalil Shakir, if he ends up being the Bills' slot wide receiver, more on that in a second. is a very solid late round sleeper. I think he's worth a look in best ball leagues, certainly. I think he's worth a look in deeper redraft leagues and dynasty leagues as well. So, heading into next season, Stefon Diggs is my wide receiver 6. Gabriel Davis is my wide receiver 46. All right, now let's talk tight ends. In the case of the Bills, that doesn't necessarily mean tight end. Anyway, the Bills targeted the tight end position 77 times in 2022, which was the third lowest rate in the NFL. After finishing as tight end 9 in fantasy points per game in 2021, Dawson Knox regressed and finished as tight end 14 in that same category in 2022. Knox spent 5 weeks in the weekly top 10 and 5 outside the weekly top 20. Another guy that had a wide range of weekly outcomes. And with Knox, it was usually dependent on whether or not he scored touchdowns. Now, we mentioned how Stefon Diggs' production went down in the second half of the season. Well, Dawson Knox's went up in the second half of the season. He was tight end 7 from weeks 10 to 18. Now, the Bills also drafted Dalton Kincaid in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft, indicating direct competition to Dawson Knox's job. Or is it? Early reports out of training camp are that Dalton Kincaid is operating not only at the tight end position, but also as a slot wide receiver. He's a big body. He played some in college at Utah. He's a very good offensive weapon for the Bills to have. And he may just line up out wide and in the slot more than he lines up as an inline tight end. Now, granted, do I think that might decrease Dawson Knox's snap percentage and target shares? Absolutely it could, because Kincaid's another big athletic body to throw to, kind of in the same vein as Dawson Knox. Do I also think it could affect Khalil Shakir's production and target share? Yes, absolutely. That would be the guy most directly affected, because I think you'll see more 2 tight end personnel packages out of the Bills if Kincaid and Knox are able to operate in separate roles. Do I think it'll affect Allen and Davis a whole lot? Not really. So the bottom line for the Bills tight ends is this. The Bills do not utilize the tight end position as we know it enough to make 2 fantasy relevant tight ends. If Dalton Kincaid ends up playing as this tight end slot offensive weapon type role, he's in an absolutely great situation. Historically, rookie tight ends have not been a good bet. They've not been very successful. The last rookie tight end to finish in the top 10 was Pat Freiermuth 2 years ago. And historically, not a whole lot of them do. However, Kincaid's in a great situation. He might not necessarily be operating as an inline tight end, and he's in one of the best offenses in the league. And so, do I think that Knox is going to have his workload eaten into a bit by Kincaid? Yes. Is Dawson Knox totally off of my radar? No. So, for that reason, Dalton Kincaid is my tight end 14 heading into next season, and Dawson Knox is my tight end 25 heading into the 2023 season. All right, that does it for the Buffalo Bills 2023 Fantasy Football Team Preview. If you watched on YouTube and you like what you saw, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. You'll be notified when new episodes drop, and it really helps me out a lot. I cannot stress that enough. I really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast on audio form, please rate and review. Again, really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. If you heard all my talk about best ball and want to try it out on Underdog. Use my promo code MConley88. You'll get your first deposit matched up to $100. And lastly, if you liked my information about these players, you want to see my full rankings for all players, for all 32 NFL teams, head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. It's $3 a month. You can just buy it for the ranks in the draft guide. It's much cheaper than if you were to go out and pay for a premium fantasy site, or if you were to go to buy a fantasy football magazine. Much more cost effective. All right, that does it for this episode, guys. So we are starting the tour of the AFC East. So next up is going to be the Miami Dolphins. If you made it this far, hopefully I was able to help you guys get some information for where and how you can draft and utilize these Bills players next year in redraft, dynasty, and best ball leagues. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.